Welcome to this 30-second Photoshop tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com, where we're going to be talking about the export option in Photoshop and all about exporting images and graphics and multiple layers, Retina graphics, everything in Photoshop. We're going to try to do it here in just a couple minutes. Before we get going, this tutorial is sponsored by our good friends over at WP Engine. They've got like the best hosting if you have a WordPress site. You got to check them out. I use them for tutvid.com. Go to tutvid.com/wp-engine. You can see the URL there appear on the screen, and I've got it in the description of this video. You get like an exclusive discount when you first sign up if you go through that link, so check it out. All right, so exporting in Photoshop, these export features I believe are new to Photoshop CC 2015. But they're pretty powerful. The first thing that we'll take a look at under File, Export, is the Quick Export as JPEG. Now, the default is Quick Export as PNG, and you can edit that here under the Export Preferences. So you can see Export Preferences, you can choose your file type. For the most part, I'm exporting JPEG files. If you have transparency, obviously check that on, and you're going to want to export a PNG. The 8-bit PNG, it's a smaller file like it says, but it's pretty low quality. The higher end PNG 24 is much better. Generally speaking, is going to be what you want to use. For the most part, though, I stick with JPEGs. It's just what I find I use most. As far as a location, you can just have Photoshop ask you every single time, where do you want me to save this file? I prefer that. The other option basically creates a folder right next to the original file and just places that exported JPEG in the folder. I like to just throw copyright and contact info metadata on here as well. I'm going to have a whole tutorial coming up on metadata and the importance of it and what you can do with it. It's pretty cool stuff. And then also color space. Convert to sRGB, which is like the screen-friendly color space. If this is an image that's going to be viewed on screens across multiple devices and all kinds of different applications, it's a good idea, generally speaking, to convert to sRGB. So I leave that checked on. Again, usually if I'm doing this, it's something that I'm throwing up on social media or Facebook or Twitter or something like that. Hit OK, and we can do something like File, Export, Quick Export as JPEG. Right here on my desktop, I can just, blah, 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 blah. Bam, save. I can bring up my desktop in my Finder, and, I can delete this version of the image, and there it is. It's right there. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop, and one of the other things you can do is just right-click on your layer and choose Quick Export as JPEG, and it's going to save the file as a JPEG or PNG or whatever you've chosen, but with that layer name as the file name. In this case, background.jpg. You can hit Save. Boom, you've got a JPEG just from that layer. That can be very useful if you have, multiple layers and you just want to select one layer and export that one layer as a JPEG and not necessarily the entire PSD. One of the other really cool things about the export option is when you have big UIs, and you can see this is a great UI that I downloaded from over at 365psd.com. Lots of great stuff, by the way. They're not a sponsor, but great stuff nonetheless. You can go File, Export, and you can export entire artboards to separate files. We don't have multiple artboards here, but if you do, that's great. Same thing, artboards to PDF files, and also layer comps to files or layer comps to PDFs. You can also export layers to individual files. So if we hit that, you're going to see it's going to say, hey, choose a destination, choose your file type, PSD, JPEG, PDF, whatever I want, save it out, and you run this sort of like action, which is going to take all these layers and start saving them out as JPEG files. I don't want to do that right now because it'll take a lot of time. You have your old legacy Save for Web dialog box, which is just what you think it is. If you have an older version of Photoshop, and by older, I mean older than like CC 2014, this is the Save for Web dialog box, Save for Web and mobile devices, whatever they were calling it. Color lookup tables, we'll have a tutorial coming on what those are soon. Really cool stuff. Paths to Illustrator, this allows you to export your paths obviously to Illustrator. Render video is just video, and Zoomify is this stupid little plugin that nobody really uses anymore. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look at what all of this means. Let's go down here to latest tweets, right? I'm just going to select that layer folder. And I'm going to go File, Export, Export As. It's going to bring up the newer Export As dialog box where I can choose things like the file format that I want to save to, the quality of the image. I can resize the image here. I can choose the resampling settings. I can increase canvas size, maybe give it a little bit of like a white margin. I can add that same metadata, the copyright and contact info, like we had options to do for that quick export. Also, same color space for sRGB. is baked right in there. Part of what makes this dialog box so super powerful and so cool, not only is the ability to export multiple files, which we're going to cover in just a second, but also the ability to export one file to multiple files. What I mean by that is we can save out one image as our normal 1x size, and if we're working with Retina graphics, we can add a second version and maybe double the size and give it the suffix of at 2x as you would expect. We can maybe do a third file if we're working with the larger iPhones and larger Android devices and go 3x, and if we decide we don't want them, we can always get rid of that stuff. Remember, if you're scaling up, make sure you're working with your smart objects, your vector-based objects, live text layers, things like that, so you're not losing the fidelity and sharpness of your graphics and edges in your file. And once you've gone ahead and made all the decisions here in the Export As dialog box, hit Export All, and it's going to export all of your images as, individual images to wherever you wish to save them. Now, obviously, we just have our one image here, so it would only save out one single JPEG file. Let's close this. Let's explore something else here. If we open up this latest tweets group and I select maybe 3 of these groups, I can even right click here in the layers panel and just choose Export As, and look at this. It's going to line up 3 separate files, all of which will be saved out as JPEGs. If you have individual parameters for each file, like you need to change sizing or add metadata for some but not others, etc., 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 you can obviously do that. You can add multiple sizes and then boom, export all, and you save all of those files out as well. That's really pretty fantastic. And obviously you can grab as many as you want or as few as you want. Now, one of the other things you can do is you can quickly just select multiple layers, right click on them and choose artboard from layers, and then you can go and obviously export entire artboards as separate files as well. So exporting, the export option in Photoshop, it's super powerful. There's really a lot to it, but half the battle is just knowing what's in there. So you guys should really go and check out the export features here in Photoshop. They can save you a ton of time, and they can really do a lot for you, which I think is what's most important about these. So for exporting and Photoshop, that's it. Get it? Got it? Good. NathanielDoddsonTutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.